I don't know.
Okay, all right. So you're saying it's a psychological warfare in the sense where they are brainwashing the people?
Yes, correct.
Okay, all
That's
right.
how, yeah.
Okay,
That's
good.
how that's how the Western scholar against Western scholars and thinking analyze how's the way of life of the Muslim, and then they try to brainwashing them. That's why we can see nowadays between Muslim, you are separated each other. I mean, like we kind of like as a Muslim, we kind of like against each other if somebody has a different way of salat, and they said, you are not my group, you are not us. So, or it's, this is the very simple example. So
Okay.
like yeah.
Okay, all right, very good. Anyone else? Sister Farah, Sister Karina?
I would say what is most apparent nowadays is certain hukum. They say that we are archaic. Like for example, chopping of the hand if you steal, and then there is riba. We say that it is haram, but they come up with a different name. So they are like conning us to make riba halal in that sense. And then there is also recognizing the rights of the others. For example, LGBT. They are now, even Muslims are already recognizing, giving them the human rights. So this kind of thing, I think it is slowly wearing off the purity of Islam.
Okay, all right, very good. MashaAllah. Anyone else? Okay, all right. So one of the other ways that Islam is being fought is through, for example, the fact that they impose on the Muslim countries this concept of this government concept of democracy, right? Every single society has their own way of of government, and whether that is right or wrong, I'm not going to get into it. Whether it's communism, socialism, right? Whether it's democracy, and how many types of democracies are there? There are just so many. So which type of democracy are you going to impose on me? There's the Sharia, there's secularism, right? So and secularism is a religion in the sense that they are imposing upon you, even if you are a religion, that you could not bring in your personal beliefs into the public sphere. So anyway, there's so much that we could talk about, and I just was hoping that everyone would participate in kind of bringing some points here so we can talk about economic sanctions. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because we mentioned how the Prophet ﷺ, he was opposed, and how the Prophet ﷺ, he was challenged by the kuffar. And those challenges, or those fighting methods, or those opposition is being used even up until now. Like, for example, one of the tactics that they use in against the Prophet ﷺ was that, you know, he's a liar. And we have people who are saying that right now. One of the other accusations that they have against the Prophet ﷺ is that he is crazy. And we have people saying that he was crazy by doing this and marrying Aisha and marrying so many people and cutting off the hands and legislating this. This is barbaric. All of these, they don't have to necessarily say the exact word of being crazy, but they can say words such as being barbaric. That he was a poet. Yeah, he was someone who was extremely eloquent. He was someone who was extremely well versed. He learned all of this from people, you know, when he used to travel early in his youth before him receiving prophethood. So these are the accusations. Whether they used it at that time, it's still being employed. The other tactic, we also talked about how Al-Walid ibn Mughira and so on, and we ended there. Now I want to go ahead and move to a different tactic that they used. And that was challenging the Prophet ﷺ for a miracle. They used to challenge the Prophet ﷺ for a miracle. They demanded to see something with their own eyes. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions this challenge of theirs in the Quran. And if we turn to chapter 17, verse 90 to 93. All right. We will find that that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَقَالُوا لَن نُؤْمِنَ لَكَ حَتَّى تَفْجُرَ لَنَا مِنَ الْأَرْضِ يَنبُوعًا. And they say, we shall not believe in you, O Muhammad, until you cause a spring to gush forth from the earth for us. We will not believe in you until you bring forth for us a spring, like a river for us. أو تكون لك جنة من نخيل وعنب فتفجر الأنهار خلالها تفجيرا. Or you have a garden of date palm trees and grapes, and make the rivers to gush forth in their midst abundantly. So over here, they're saying that we want you to give us gardens of date palms and grapes, and we want rivers coming out of those in abundance. Or you make the heavens fall upon us in fragments as you have claimed, or you bring Allah and the angels before us. Or you have a house of gold, or you ascend up into the sky, and even then we will not believe in your ascension until you bring down for us a book that we would read. So even here they say, even if you were to go up to the heavens and we see you, we will still not believe in you until you go ahead and bring down a book for us to read. So after all of this, Allah, He tells the Prophet ﷺ, say to them, glorified, meaning Subhanallah, like Subhana Rabbi. Glorified be my Lord above all that evil they associate with Him. Meaning, glorified is my Lord, and He is above all the evil that they associate with Him. Am I anything but a man sent as a messenger? And what that means is, I cannot do any of these things. I am only a human being like you, but I am a messenger of Allah. So you see how they were trying to challenge the Prophet ﷺ in these things in order to put a stop to him, in order to go ahead and make his mission that much harder for him. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells the Prophet, say to them, I'm only a prophet. I'm not, I'm not God walking on earth. Now a question may arise, why didn't Allah give them these miracles? If the Prophet is a true prophet, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to help His Prophet, why wouldn't Allah help His Prophet in this? Because that would certainly make his job easier. Right? Well, first we have to understand that Allah did give them many miracles. And the major one was splitting of the moon. Okay. And when the Prophet ﷺ, he did that, they said about him, he bewitched our eyes. He made magic on our eyes. So what makes you think that if the Prophet ﷺ was to ascend to the heavens and bring down a book, or make the gardens with rivers flowing inside of them, and then date palm trees and the grape vineyards and all of this stuff, a house made out of gold and silver, what makes you think that they will not say the same thing that they said about him when he split the moon? Now the other reason is Allah, he did reveal a book. He did reveal a book to them. And that was the Quran. That was the greatest miracle. And Allah kept on emphasizing that the Quran is a miracle to them. All right? And the third reason we could say is that Allah knew that they are just asking out of stubbornness, and they're actually not serious. Okay? That they are actually not serious about accepting Islam. They're just making that as an excuse. They're just making that as an excuse. And it was out of their arrogance. And this is also proven that they were given other miracles, and they did not accept Islam. So this was just an excuse being used by them in order to not accept Islam. Look at what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says in chapter 6 verse 111. And even if we had sent down unto them angels, and the dead has spoken to them, and we had gathered together all things before their eyes, they would not have believed unless Allah will, but most of them behave ignorantly. You see? So over here in another part of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that even if I was to do this, even if I was to send down the angels, even if I was to make the dead speak to them, meaning their dead relatives, to speak to them that yes, we are suffering in our graves, we are in Jahannam because we were mushrikeen, so believe in the oneness of Allah. So even if the dead spoke to them, their own relatives that died, and everything that we created in front of them, they still would not believe in Allah. And another wisdom is that Allah, He's above all of these things. Why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala need to give into or even answer any of their petty issues? Do you guys understand? Like, for example, if I was, it's like if I go to a billionaire and say, if you are actually a billionaire, prove it to me by buying me a house. You think the billionaire cares whether I believe in him or not? You know what I'm saying? Like, he will see me as insignificant. He's like, who are you? Who are you for me to go ahead and prove to you, let alone for me to buy you a house to prove to you? You want to believe, that's up to you. You don't want to believe, I don't care. It doesn't hurt me. It doesn't hurt me. And Allah, He's above this example. So He doesn't need to give into these petty requests. That now every time another Bedouin will come tomorrow and say, well, I will only believe in Allah if He gives me a flock of sheep, for example. And then someone else will go and he will make the same condition. Allah, He doesn't work that way. He sends down prophets with the message, with the truth that people could actually verify. It's not like anyone can just come with the message and claim that, no, this is verifiable truth. And he supports them with certain miracles for that time. Whether it's the miracle of fighting magicians in the time of Musa alayhi salam, whether it's the miracle of healing certain types of sicknesses, such as the blind, the leper, the dead in the time of Isa alayhi salam, whether it's like interpreting dreams that no one else could interpret, such as the story of the miracle of Yusuf alayhi salam, whether it is fighting kingdoms and conquering them and overcoming them, such as the miracles of Prophet Dawood alayhi salam, whether it's having a kingdom that no one else had, so that way you could subjugate others to the subjugate them to Islam, such as Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam and his miracles. Whatever the time was, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would support that prophet with those miracles that were pertinent to those times. That was like a challenge, basically. So same thing with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah, he supported him with so many miracles, and above all of them, the Quran, because poetry, like I said last week, about how Walid ibn Mughira, when the Quran was recited, he never imagined the beauty, like such beauty. And I'll give you another example as well. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he doesn't need to fulfill these people's requests. You believe in him, that's good for you. You don't believe in him, you're not going to cause Allah any harm. Okay? And the other wisdom that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this is actually very, very important, so pay attention. This is very important. One of the biggest wisdom, the main reason Allah did not fulfill their challenge or their request is that if you reject it, you will face immediate annihilation. You will face immediate punishment. Because now you challenged Allah, Allah fulfills it, and if you don't believe in it, then Allah will completely destroy you, just like the nations before. In fact, there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that once the people of Mecca, they begged the Prophet ﷺ to convert the mountain of Safa. You know, Marwa and Safa, when we go for Hajj and Umrah, we go up and down between those two mountains, right? 7 times. So they said, convert for us the mountain of Safa into gold. The Prophet ﷺ, he felt that these people were actually sincere. So he made a special dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to convert it into gold. So Allah sent Jibreel alayhi salam down, and he said, if you want, I will convert the mountain of Safa into gold, but if they refuse to believe in your prophethood, they will not have a second chance. Meaning immediately the curse of Allah and the punishment of Allah will come upon them. So if they refuse, the punishment of Allah will come instantaneously. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he realized that this is not a joke. He realized that it is better that this miracle doesn't happen. That this miracle doesn't happen. Now let's look at what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says of the nations of the past in chapter 17 verse 59. Chapter 17 verse 59. Look at what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he said, and nothing stops us from sending proofs or evidences or signs, basically ayah or ayat, it's the plural, ayah Yes, it means verse of the Quran, but it also means signs or proofs or evidence. So he's saying, and nothing stops us from sending the proofs, except that the people of before deny them. And we sent the she-camel to the people of Thamud as a clear sign, but they did her wrong, meaning they killed her. Remember that she-camel? They said, give us a sign that you are a prophet. These people, Thamud, they told their prophet, Hud, give us a sign. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought to them a she-camel from where? From just a mountain, like it came out of a mountain. And that was a clear sign from Allah. And it was pregnant. So Allah said, do not do any harm. But they did that. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, even when I had showed them these people my signs or our signs, that they still denied it, and they even transgressed even more. They transgressed even more. All right? All right. Let's see. Now, another tactic that the kuffar of Makkah were using against the Prophet ﷺ was trying to negotiate with him in order for him not to spread or do da'wah of Islam. They tried to even bribe him. All right? Now, when they saw that many people were converting into Islam and that the society was breaking up, so they told the Prophet ﷺ, let's come to a compromise. Let's make a deal. One day we will be Muslims and we will worship what you are worshiping. And then the next day, you will become like us and you will worship what we are worshiping. This is the compromise that they wanted. But we know that there is no compromise in Islam. There's no compromise in Islam. You cannot have compromise, especially in your aqidah, especially in your belief. This one. So there is no compromise in your tawheed, in your aqidah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He revealed Surah Al-Kafirun, chapter 109. And this is what we recite every single day in our salah as well. Look at what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says. Qul. This means, this is a command to the Prophet to tell the people. He says, say, O Muhammad, to the people, O disbelievers, O kuffar, I do not worship that which you worship, nor will you worship that which I worship, and nor will I be a worshipper of what you worship, nor will you be worshippers of what I worship. To you be your religion, and to me my religion. Now, this is something that's a very clear, clear surah telling them his answer. But my question is, why did Allah He reveal verses 2 and 4? I mean, they're basically, if you look at it on a outside, they're basically saying the same thing. Look at what it says. I worship not that which you worship, and I shall not worship that which you are worshiping. Basically the same thing. So why repeat it 2 times? And the reason is, and Allah knows best, is that the second, okay, right here, so you guys have to pay attention. So this right here, the second verse and the third verse, they refer to worshiping Allah or worshiping the idols. Whereas the fourth and the fifth, they refer to the actions of worship, such as, for example, praying, fasting, giving zakat, and so on. So basically, this is what he's saying. I worship not that which you worship, meaning I worship not those idols that you worship. And then in verse 4, nor will I be a worshiper, meaning nor will I be a worshiper of Allah, in terms, meaning I will not be a worshiper by throwing arrows in front of the idols or clapping, be a clapping type of worshiper, being a singing type of worshiper, being a worshiper that will make shirk in there. You guys understand here? Is that clear? So number 2, verse number 2, I mean, this is not our topic for today, so I'm not going to spend too much time, but I'm sure some of you guys were wondering what's the difference between verse number 2 and verse number 4 when the meaning is apparently very similar. So over here, this refers to I worship not those idols that you worship. I worship not those idols that you worship. And number 4, it means, so number 3 would also mean, nor will you worship Allah, that Allah which I worship, meaning the kuffar will not worship Allah. And over here, the 4th verse, which is similar to the second one, nor will I be a worshiper in the way you guys are worshiping, such as clapping and dancing and the way you guys slaughter for your gods. I will not do that. The way you guys throw arrows in front of your idols, I will not do that. So it refers to the actions of worship. The actions of worship. Is that clear?
Excuse me, Sheikh, can I ask one question, please?
Yes.
About these arrows, I read somewhere else, do not draw arrows, and you now mentioned these arrows. Can you just shortly enlighten what actually that refers to? That confused me sometimes. What arrows have been drawn there?
Yeah, so what they used to do is whenever they wanted to go ahead and decide certain things, whether they wanted to travel, for example, whether they wanted to make a venture on a business project, whatever it was that they used to do, in order in order for them to see whether they should do it or not, they used to draw arrows. So for example, like they would have arrows like this, right? And someone would cover it from the bottom. Now, if you drew an arrow that was smaller than the other one, that means no, don't travel. Okay? If you drew the longer one, then that means yes, go ahead, and it means yes to whatever it is you want to do, whether it's marrying someone, whether it is traveling, whether it is doing business, whatever it is. So that's how they used to decide their affairs. They also used to fly pigeons. Now, for example, they would catch a pigeon, and if they wanted to travel to tomorrow, they would, they would let go of the pigeon. If the pigeon flew to the right, that means it's a good sign. Go ahead, travel tomorrow. If the pigeon flew to the left side, right, of course, it's going to fly up first. So if it flew, and then it's going straight, and then it goes to the left, it's a bad sign. Don't go. Don't marry that person. Now, how do we decide? Of course, after taking all the necessary precautions, after thinking about it, doing our research, what do? We make salatul istikhara. That's how we do it. Whereas they used to go ahead and decide based upon arrows, drawing arrows. All right.
And excuse me, and flipping a coin, for example, is rather un-Islamic, I can say, yeah?
Yeah, that's haram. That's like
okay, good.
Yeah, so
yes, I'm still a little baby learning, right? You know, I'm a 3 years young Mu'allaf. Yes, thank you.
But I'm talking about, like, for example, I'm not talking about, for example, who should play or who should go first, and then you flip a coin. That's okay. If you flip a coin to determine who should go first, that is okay. But I'm talking about you associating the divine will of Allah with flipping a coin. That would not be okay. Like, should I marry, and then you flip a coin? You can't do that. But if it's like, all right, me and you are are playing football, or we're doing something, and then who should go first, and we flip a coin, that's okay. That's just to kind of determine who should go first, and that's the only way to do it.
Okay, thank you. I get that then. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
Or, for example, we have like for example, if you want to distribute some meat, like for example, me and you, we cut a cow together on the day of Eid, right? Me and you share a cow, and what we do is basically to the best of our ability, we split the cow in half, and you get this side, I get that side. But who decides which side I get? Maybe, or not maybe, definitely, it's not going to be an even 50-50. Maybe it's 51-49. Maybe it's 55-45. Just by looking at it, it looks 50-50, but in reality, it's not. So in order for us to not have ill feelings, what you can do is, you could determine with sticks or whatever. That's not really, we're not worshiping Allah through that. We're just trying to determine who gets with which part in a very fair way. Because if you bring someone else, maybe he's your friend, and there's other, small little things that if a person was to use it without it being used to determine the will of Allah, then that is okay. If you use these things to determine the qadr, your qadr, then your predestination, then that would actually be shirk. So we can't really use those things to determine. So what do we do? If I want to get married to someone, I will go ahead, and after having an interview with their family, and after having seen that individual and asking them a few questions, you know what? I want to proceed with this. So I will go ahead and pray Salatul Istikhara, which is to consult Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and ask Allah through His names and His power, whether me proceeding with this is good for me or not. If it is, Allah will make it more easier. If it is not, Allah will put obstacles in my way, so that way I don't proceed. But if I never want to proceed with that individual, then there's actually no reason for me to pray Salatul Istikhara because I have already made up my mind. So a lot of people, they don't know how to use Salatul Istikhara. They will go ahead, either they want Allah to make up their minds for them. No, you have to make up your mind. And if it is good, then Allah will facilitate it for you and make it easy for you. And if it is not good, then Allah will make it hard even if you want it. Now, if you don't want something, Allah is not going to push it on you because it's your personal choice, it's your free will. You're just asking Allah. I mean, just look at the meaning of Salatul Istikhara and it will tell you the purpose of Istikhara. What is saying, what you are asking Allah, oh Allah, Allahumma in kunta ta'alamu anna hadha al-amr, oh Allah, if you know that this affair of mine which I am about to embark upon, if it is good for me, which means that you are ready to embark upon a journey, the journey of marriage, the journey of business. If you want to go to another university and you don't know whether you should do it, and then finally you come to the realization, you know what, I should, but you don't know whether it's good for you or not. So then you make Salatul Istikhara. After you have like decided according to your research it is good, but you just need Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to put barakah in it. And if it is not good for you, then you're asking Allah to remove it from you. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Yes,
Dave.
thank you very much. I need to learn that. Istikhara. I will learn that later. Yes.
Inshallah. Maybe if someone can remind me later on, or maybe Sister Farah can send the dua of istikhara, both
Inshallah.
English transliteration. I don't know how good Brother Renee can read Arabic, but maybe the transliteration and the translation and the Arabic, maybe during quarantine he could try to learn that, inshallah. Maybe next week, Brother Renee, maybe you can recite for us the dua.
Oh, wow. Yes. Thank you for your consideration and burden upon myself. Yes.
Inshallah. Inshallah.
Yeah, nothing else to do, Brother Renee. You're at home, so.
No, sure. Okay, I'll do my best. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Maybe you're busy, but okay. All right. So anyway, now the other tactics that the Quraysh, the people of Mecca, were using against the Prophet ﷺ was always questioning and quizzing him, and always doubting him, and always trying to expose the Prophet ﷺ by quizzing him with questions that only a true prophet would know the answer to. Now the Arabs didn't really know what is the notion of prophet. What does it mean to be a prophet? Why? Because for thousands of years, no prophet had actually come to them. For thousands of years, no prophet had actually come to them. Or maybe I can say for hundreds of years, rather. Actually, no, I can't say for thousands of years, because after Ismail alayhi salam, all the prophets were to the Jews. So for thousands of years, no prophet had come to them. And so they really didn't know the notion of prophethood, what it means to be a prophet. But the Jews, they did. The Jews, they knew, because they would be getting prophets after prophets. And Allah, He says about the Quraysh in the Quran in chapter 32, okay, chapter 32, verse 3, I think. Chapter 32, verse 3. He says, or do they say, he invented it. Rather, it is the truth from your Lord, O Muhammad, that you may warn a people to whom no warner has come before you, so perhaps they will be guided. So they used to say, he invented this Quran. O Prophet, O Muhammad, tell them it is the truth from your Lord. And he's saying that, you know, in a way, these people, no prophet, no warner has come to them before you. Before you. So over here, the Prophet ﷺ comes, and he comes at such a perfect time, because these people were actually just living in darkness after darkness with so much shirk. And shirk, we said, was started by one of their great-great-great-grandfathers. Remember I mentioned this in the earlier class, how he actually went to travel to the Byzantine Empire in Syria, and he saw how those people, some of those people were actually worshiping idols. And he brought that idol back to Mecca, and that's how idol worshipping started to spread. He was one of the very influential people of Mecca. So that is how idol worshipping started in Mecca. But before that, they used to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the Jews, they had prophets after prophets coming to them. So the people of Mecca, they only knew, the Jews and the Christians, that these are the people whom the prophets used to come to and talk to them and recite the words of Allah. So what the people of Mecca did is that they went to Medina to visit the Jews, and they said this phenomenon of prophethood that used to occur with you guys is now happening to us. Meaning, how you guys always used to talk about that we had so many prophets and we believe in such and such prophet. Now all of a sudden this thing is happening to us now. So tell us something, because of your background in believing in all of these prophets, tell us something that we can quiz and test Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam with, so that way we can expose that he is a liar. Not so that way we could determine whether he is a liar. No. They have already pre-decided that he's a liar. That's it, no matter what he says. So their mind is already made up. But anyway, give us some things, give us some information that only prophets know. And so that way, or we can ask him, and if he doesn't answer in the way that you guys told us your prophets used to answer, then we will say he's a fake prophet. He's a prophet. He's a fake person. He's a person who's lying to be a prophet. So the Jews said, okay, ask him about Ishaq, ask him about Yaqub, and ask him about Yusuf alayhi salam. Ask him what happened to the family of Yaqub. So they went to the Prophet ﷺ and asked him about Yusuf. And then Allah, he revealed the whole Surah Yusuf as a response. That is now another surah that was revealed completely. Remember? Which one, Brother Renee, Sister Ira, Sister Karina, where are you guys? What was the first surah that was revealed completely? Remember what I said? You guys remember? Which surah?
I'm out. I don't remember.
Okay.
Al-Fatiha.
Very good. Al-Fatiha.
Al-Fatiha, yes.
Yeah, very good. Al-Fatiha, Surah Al-Fatiha was the first surah that was revealed completely. Meaning in one shot, not in stages. And the other surah that was revealed completely is Surah Yusuf. But wow, subhanAllah, Surah Yusuf was so long. So long. So when it was revealed, Allah, He revealed all of this, and then after a while, He was able to recite it to the people. So this is what Allah, He says. Look what Allah, He says to the Prophet ﷺ in chapter 12, verse 102. After He revealed the surah, towards the end, this is what Allah, He says. He says, this is from the news of the unseen, which we reveal, O Muhammad, to you. And you were not with them when they put together their plan while they conspired. You see that? So Allah, He's telling the Prophet ﷺ, look, this is from the news of the unseen, which we reveal to you. And you were not with those people of Quraysh when they put together their plan, when they conspired against you. So you didn't know. You didn't know about this, about the Quraysh, that this is how they were going to the Jews of Medina, and they were basically conspiring to try to expose you. So you didn't know this about them, but we went ahead and in order to go ahead and protect you, and support you, we went ahead and revealed this particular surah and what was said about Yusuf alayhi salam. Does that make sense? So the Quraysh, they had no clue who Yusuf was. Yet the Prophet ﷺ, he answered miraculously through this most beautiful surahs in the Quran. Now another incident was that the Arabs again, they sent a delegation to Medina and asked the Jews, you know what, he told us everything that happened about Prophet Yaqub and Prophet Yusuf and Ishaq. So give us other questions that we could actually quiz the Prophet ﷺ, that we can quiz Muhammad with. They said to ask him about 3 things that no one would know the details about except a true prophet. So make sure you write these down. That no one would know the details about except a true prophet. Ask him about the story of the young men who entered a cave and slept for a long time. Ask him about those young individuals. The second one, ask him about a man who traveled the world from east to west and had experiences that are legend. Who was that man that traveled east and west? And ask him about the ruh, the spirit, the soul. What is it made of? And where does it come from? That's a very trick question. What is the ruh? What is the soul? What is the spirit? What is it made of? Where does it come from? So the Prophet ﷺ, he was asked these 3 questions when they came back and told the people, all right, come back tomorrow and I'll let you know. So when they asked him this, after they had returned back from Medina, when they asked this to the Prophet, he said to them, come back tomorrow and I will let you know. So the Prophet ﷺ was confident that he's going to let them know tomorrow, because what was the usual pattern? The usual pattern was Jibreel alayhi salam is going to come and support the Prophet with revelation from Allah. But the Prophet ﷺ, he forgot to say Insha'Allah. Insha'Allah. He forgot to say that. And therefore, when tomorrow came, he didn't have an answer to them. So then he was like, I don't have anything. Then when the next day came, he didn't have an answer for them. The third day, the fourth day. Now imagine, what would a prophet who's actually fake, who's a charlatan, he's going to go ahead and make up stuff. All right? He's going to go ahead and just say anything just to please the people, whatever it is. But that's not what the Prophet ﷺ did. He had to put up with this, I guess you could say, like this dilemma that, you know what? Look at, I don't want to be seen as someone who is not going to give them an answer. I don't want to be seen like a liar. I don't want to be seen as, I almost have these people accepting Islam. What is the answer? But he didn't make up an answer. Why? Because that's not him. He doesn't speak from his own accord. Anyway, this carried on for 2 weeks, and some narration says even for 1 whole month. So eventually Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he revealed Surah Al-Kahf as the response to these questions. As a response to these questions. But in it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he tells the Prophet, never say, don't say that you will do something tomorrow, except that you say, Insha'Allah. وَلَا تَقُولَنَّ لِشَيْءٍ إِنِّي فَاعِلٌ ذَلِكَ غَدًا إِلَّا أَنْ يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ. Meaning, except that you say, Insha'Allah. So that was a lesson. That was an immediate lesson to the Prophet ﷺ. Next time, don't say anything that you're going to do tomorrow until you also say, Insha'Allah. So in Surah Al-Kahf, the people of Quraysh were given the details about those young men in the cave that even the Jews didn't know about. Dhul Qarnayn was the reference here, okay, who traveled the east and the west. Now, just a side note, some people in our times, they say Dhul Qarnayn was Alexander the Great. But there's actually no evidence for this. And in fact, it is contrary to many things that we know. For example, Alexander the Great was a pagan. He was a mushrik. Whose teacher was who? Was Aristotle, who believed in the gods of the Greek mythology. And Dhul Qarnayn, he was a believer. He was a righteous monotheist. He was not a pagan. Now, the scholars, they did differ whether Dhul Qarnayn was a prophet or not. That's something of scholarly debate. But whether he was Alexander the Great or not, no, that is actually false. It's contrary, because Dhul Qarnayn, Allah says that he is a believer. He is a believer. And Alexander the Great, he was a pagan. All right. And the other answer, the other question that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answered in Surah Al-Kahf was about the soul. And what did Allah say about the soul? What did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say about the soul? He said that, just tell them, it is a command of your Lord. That's it. He says, and they asked you about the spirit, about the ruh, about the soul. say that this is a command of my Lord. That's it. You don't need to go get into any of these philosophical arguments. You don't need to get into these philosophical arguments with them. How is it? Where is it? How did it come from where? No, you just say it is the command of your Lord. Allah, He says be, and it is. That's it. The other tactic that the kuffar, let's just take, before I go on to the next one, let's take some questions if we have any. If not, then we will go ahead and take a...
Yes, please. Excuse me, Sheikh. I have some question here.
Yes.
Yeah. How did the Quraysh come up with all of these questions? Is there any guide for them? For example, maybe there's a book, or I don't know whether they read the Bible before. I don't know any book that they read that could be their guide to ask all of these questions or all of these quizzes to Prophet. Is there any guide?
So as I mentioned, that they didn't come up with these questions. They went to Medina to ask the Jews what they could say to the Prophet, what they could say to Muhammad in order to expose him whether he's a liar or not, because they never had experience with the Prophet before, since there was no Prophet that came before Muhammad to the people of Quraysh. So they heard that, yeah, all these Jews and Christians, they used to claim that they have prophets and all of this. Let's go ahead and ask them, since they have experience with prophets, what we can say to him in order to expose him. Do you understand?
Yes, I understand. Makes sense. But anyway, all of these Jews or Christian actually they read their book and mention about the prophet is the last. Prophet Muhammad is the last prophet. Even it's mentioned on their book, right? So why they keep asking all of this question to?
Yeah. So yes, very good. So now it was not mentioned in their books where he's going to come from. So they knew that there is going to be a man by the name of Ahmed, or a man by the name of Muhammad, and he is going to be the last prophet. And they knew where he's going to come from the city, or where he's going to rise from the city where there are date palm trees. So they looked around and they said, or some of them, of course, so there's different tribes amongst the Jews. So some of them, they went and migrated to Medina, because that is where the date palm trees are. So they traveled to Medina. This is like 500, 600, 700 years. Let me see. About 70. About the year 73. Okay, 73 or 93. So they traveled all the way to Medina from Jerusalem. Some of them, of course, a tribe of them, and some of them went to Khaybar. That's where it was known, the date palm trees was known there, in the hopes that this last prophet would be from amongst them. Right? But they didn't realize that it's not going to be from them. It's going to be from the Arabs, not from the Jews. So when they found out that it is not from them, and they don't have the honor of having the last prophet, and it is from the Arabs, and they made all of these sacrifices for hundreds of years, they left their homeland, they came all the way here in the hope that it will be born from amongst their lineage. That's when they decided that, you know what, we're not going to believe in him because he's not from us. I mean, they actually didn't even believe in the prophets that were from them. So this one is even more so. Does that make sense?
Yes, makes sense. Thank you very much, Sheikh.
You're welcome. We'll talk about this much later on when we go to Medina, inshallah, and what was the response of some of those Jewish tribesmen and their chiefs. Right? All right, let's take a 5-minute break, inshallah, and we will come back. All right, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Let's resume our class, inshallah. The other tactic that they used against the Prophet ﷺ, and against the Muslims was just outright torture. Outright torture. They used to go ahead and torture the Prophet ﷺ. Now, in the Arab society, your tribe was your protection. So those who had tribal connections, they had a tribe, they were somewhat protected. And the Prophet ﷺ, him being from amongst the Quraysh, had his protection in his own tribe. However, what about the slaves or the freed slaves? They didn't have this type of protection. They didn't have the protection because they didn't have a tribe amongst the Quraysh. Or even those people who were not slaves, but they were from outside of Mecca. They wouldn't have this type of protection. So what would they do? They would go ahead and start torturing the Sahaba. And actually they were asked, how were the Sahaba tortured in the early days? And so some of the Sahaba, they would say that the believers, the Sahaba would be so severely tortured that they would be starved. They would be deprived of water. And they couldn't even sit up because that's how much they would be whipped with lashes and sticks, that they couldn't even sit up because of the pain that it caused them, or because of the broken bones. That it was so bad when they were asked by the mushrikeen, that is Allah and Al-Uzza your God? Those were the names of the two prominent gods. And some of them, because of the severity of the pain, of the torture, they would say, yes, Allah and Uzza are my gods, just to get rid of the torture. It even came to the point that if an insect passed by them and they were told to say it is their God, they would say so. If an insect, whether it was an ant or a cockroach or a spider, they say, is that your God? They will say, yes, that's my God. Even to them, it was not their God, the mushrikeen. But just to get, just to have the torture uplifted from them. Now, this brings us to, an important thing, and that is, in Islam, it allows us to say these things if you are being tortured to death, as long as you don't believe it in your heart, as long as your heart remains in Islam. Right? Now, one of the people who was the biggest torturer was Abu Jahl. He was the main propagator of this torture. This is why the Prophet ﷺ, he called him the Fir'aun of this ummah. Okay? He called him the Fir'aun of this ummah. Abu Jahl had a series of tactics. Number one, if the people who converted to Islam was from the noblemen of Quraysh, he would curse them. He would verbally abuse them. If the person was a businessman who was doing business with the Quraysh, he would boycott him. And if they were slaves and freed slaves, they would be physically tortured and they would try to kill them. Okay? So these were some of the ways that he would go ahead and use against those people who accepted Islam. Now, one of the famous people that he tortured was who? Was Bilal radiallahu anhu. Bilal ibn Rabah al-Habashi. Bilal, the son of Rabah, the African. That's what it means, al-Habashi, the African. Bilal, he refused to budge one bit. Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, he said about him, he said, Bilal considered his soul insignificant in front of Allah. I mean, when Iman entered their hearts, their soul, that's it. It truly entered. So Bilal, he was willing to give up his soul, his life for Allah. So the Quraysh, they concentrated their efforts on him. And Bilal was handed down some of the roughest punishments. Some of the roughest punishment. They will put a rope around his neck and drag him through the streets. And while they are dragging him, Bilal radiallahu anhu will say, Ahadun Ahad, Ahadun Ahad, crying the oneness of Allah Azza wa Jal. Umayyah ibn Khalaf, the owner of Bilal, the one who owned Bilal radiallahu anhu, he also participated in the torture of his slave. Now, they wanted to torture him just enough so he could renounce his faith, but not so much that it would damage the property. Because at the end of the day, they owned these slaves. It's like, for example, if your computer or if your, yeah, but I remember, I remember back in the days when we had a TV and the TV didn't work, or the signal was bad. Remember those antennas? Signal was bad. So what did we do? We used to slap it, all right, and then it would start working again. Now we used to slap it just enough so that way it can start working. We wouldn't slap it so that way it can break. Or even like the games, for example, that we used to play when we were kids. We used to like bang it just so maybe like the CPU was dislodged a little bit, or the motherboard, whatever it was probably dislodged a little bit. But we would just go ahead and hit it just enough not to crack the screen, not to cause severe damage or anything like that. Just enough so that way it can fall back in line. And we do that with so many things. You just give it a little bit of time. Now with Bilal radiallahu anhu, they didn't, that was like that was a lot of money. It cost hundreds of thousands of ringgits in our modern day, if I was to convert that. Okay? So it costs a lot of money. So they don't want to just burn that money. They want to go ahead and just put him back in line, so hit or torture him just enough so that way he doesn't die from it. He doesn't have like any broken bones. He's not paralyzed. Then what you gonna do with it? Like, you just wasted your money. So they were also still concerned about their investment. They didn't want to do that. That was their property at the end of the day. So they had to be very careful. But nonetheless, this does not mean that he was not severely tortured. He was a strong individual, right? Bilal radiallahu anhu was very tough, both physically and spiritually. So he could take a lot of the punishment and the pain without really being broken. So his owner, which was Umayyah ibn Khalaf, which Bilal radiallahu anhu ended up killing in the Battle of Badr a year after they had traveled or had made a migration to Medina, right? So Umayyah ibn Khalaf, he participated in the torture of Bilal radiallahu anhu. Okay? And they did that in order to convert him back to their religion. Now there was another slave that they tortured very, very bad. And his name was Khabbab ibn al-Arat. Khabbab ibn al-Arat. And he was one of the first 10 converts of Islam. He was an Arab slave. Okay. Now, Arab slaves, they were treated a little bit better than slaves from Africa. So Khabbab, he was a forger. What that means is he used to forge like metals. You know, when you want to forge 2 pieces of iron, you go ahead and heat that up, and then once it would be heated, it's like almost in that liquid form state. So then you would go ahead and forge it. That was his profession. His master was a female. So when she found out that Khabbab converted, she paid a whole bunch of gang, meaning a whole bunch of people, in order to beat him up. And she would go ahead and use the iron that he would use to forge, you know, those metals, those irons, those swords. She would go ahead and use those hot metals in order to burn his back. Many years later, when Umar radiallahu anhu was the Khalifa, Khabbab visited Umar, and Umar, of course, Umar at this time, he was not a Muslim, and he would actually be a witness to those things, right? He wouldn't participate in them when it came to Khabbab. Of course, he did, you know, beat up some people, but Umar, he knew about Khabbab. He knew that Khabbab preceded him to Islam. He knew Khabbab beat him to Islam. So many years later, of course, we're talking about 20 years later, when Umar radiallahu anhu was the Khalifa, Khabbab, he visited Umar in Medina, and Umar asked him about the things that happened to him and how he was tortured. So Khabbab, he didn't say anything. He just lifted his shirt and showed his back to Umar radiallahu anhu. Umar said, Wallahi, I have never seen anything as I have seen today. Now, these were people who were used to seeing like blood and gore and hands being cut off and necks being cut off. They were used to that because of battles and so many things. These were battle-hardened individuals. These are people who were not, you know, living in a bubble. These were not people who were, you know, like the way we are. If we see like a chicken being slaughtered, we all can't sleep that night. No, these people saw humans. They actually even participated in the torture before Islam. But when he saw the back of Khabbab, he said, Wallahi, I have never seen anything like that. That's how badly he was tortured. Let's talk briefly about the torture of Yasir and Sumayya and Ammar. Yasir and Sumayya and Ammar, they were a family that used to be tortured in front of each other. Okay? In front of each other. So these 3 individuals, they used to be tortured together. And all of them, they were slaves. Yasir and Sumayya, they became the first martyrs in Islam. They became the first martyrs of Islam. In fact, every time the Prophet ﷺ, he would pass by Yasir and Ammar and Sumayya, he would say to them, be patient, O family of Yasir. Indeed, your appointed, your promised place is Jannah. You have to also realize that it was so painful for the Prophet ﷺ to see them being tortured. as he was walking by them. But he couldn't do anything at this stage. When Yasir was being tortured, it made his wife, Sumayya, even more full of Iman. They were owned by Abu Jahl. They were owned by Abu Jahl. So once Abu Jahl, he got so upset, he got so full of rage that he actually took a spear and killed Sumayya and killed Yasir. He didn't care about his investment. He didn't care about his property. And he would torture the remaining individual that was alive, Ammar, who was the son of Yasir. Who was the son of Yasir. Right? Suhaib al-Rumi. Now, there's so much I could say about them, and I feel guilty that we are not really talking so much about, you know, their torture and what they went through because of time. But I would definitely recommend you guys to read about, you know, them. My job is just to give you guys just a little bit, not just every single thing. We cannot go into too much details. I like to go into details, but just not too much. The other individual was Suhaib al-Rumi. Suhaib, the Roman. The Roman. And he was also tortured. Once the leaders of the Quraysh, like Abu Jahl, Umayyah bin Khalaf, and these individuals, they began talking with the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ became hopeful that some of them were coming closer to Islam, right? Because they were having a conversation with the Prophet. And when Ammar, Suhaib, and Bilal passed by, Abu Jahl, who was worried that other leaders were getting sympathetic to Islam, took advantage of this, and he remarked, "O Muhammad, how is it possible that if you are upon the truth, these people," right? So who are these people? These people are basically, according to them, the lowest in society. They're a bunch of slaves. He said, how is it possible that these people are following, you know, it before us? If you want us to accept Islam, then you have to get rid of these people. We cannot sit on the same platform. We cannot sit on, you know, the same table as these individuals. So what he's saying is that in other words, what he's saying is, your religion is just having a whole bunch of slaves. If you want us to come and basically, if you want us to come into Islam and make Islam honorable, then you have to get rid of these people. That's what he's saying. So how can we, noble people, be in the same level as these bunch of slaves? So, and the Prophet ﷺ, he refused. The Prophet ﷺ, he refused. In fact, Allah, he revealed in chapter 6, verse 52. Chapter 6, verse 52. What did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveal? Look at what Allah, he says. And turn not away those who invoke their Lord, morning and afternoon seeking his face. Okay? You are accountable for them in nothing, and they are accountable for you in nothing, that you may turn them away and thus become of the unjust. So over here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's saying that if you were to reject these people, meaning Bilal, Suhaib al-Rumi, Ammar, these individuals, if you were to have rejected them, then you would be from the wrongdoers. So that is what Allah told the Prophet ﷺ, that if you turn away from Ammar, Suhaib and Bilal, in order that the elites of Quraysh become Muslim, if you were to choose the elites over these slaves, you would be of the Zalimun, those who are oppressors. Okay. The other tactic that the Quraysh that they used against the Prophet, and this was, you could say, the last tactic, I guess. I don't want to call it last. The last tactic before they resorted to actually now fighting them and killing them. Yeah, maybe I can say that. It was the last tactic that was like before Medina, before they started to go ahead and start to actually start to kill them and fight them in battles. And that is the tactic of boycott. Okay, that is the tactic of boycotting them. All right. Do you have any questions?
Yes, please, Sheikh. Regarding this, the torturing that the earlier Muslim receive, I would like to ask you about what is the hikmah or the wisdom that we can take as the lesson from the torturing or the suffering of Ummah recently, particularly in in Palestine and Yemen, Syria. I mean, like, because we concluded they are Muslim, they are good Muslim, but they got tortured by by the occupations.
Okay, very good question. All right. So what is the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in letting these people be tortured? Well, I could think of a few. One, first of all, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is wanting to elevate their ranks, wanting to make their ranks higher in Jannah. Sometimes when Allah, He wants you to have a level, a high level, a certain level of Jannah, He is going to bring upon you different difficulties and different hardships and different results in order for you to get that high place in Jannah. And that high place in Jannah you cannot get through your regular worship, through your regular fasting. You can't get it like that. You can only get it through being tested. So that's one. The other reason is, in order to show, like when these Sahaba were being tortured, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that if anything like this happens to you, then you could actually look up to these kinds of individuals and seek comfort in knowing that there were other people who were greater than you and they also suffered because of Islam. So you're not the only one. So if we look at some of the poorest people and what they are going through, for example, in Palestine, in Iraq, in Burma, in Afghanistan, in Libya, in some of the, like Kenya, some of these poorest countries in Somalia, when we look at what they're going through and what they have been going through the past 30, 40, 50 years, what they have been going through, we never really got the true understanding until now. Why? Because now we are also in lockdown. You know, all those people that were in lockdowns because of the bombings, they couldn't go to work. They couldn't go to work because if they went, the army would shoot them. The occupating or the occupational forces would shoot them. Well, guess what? We're all locked down too. We can't work. We can't earn a living. We're all locked down. There's a curfew. Now we could actually feel what those people have been feeling the past 50, 60 years. So it makes us realize what they went through, but actually we're not going through it as bad as them. So for them, they're like, what lockdown? We would have been in lockdown all the time, our whole life. You understand?
Yes, thank you very much.
The other reason is in order for us to help them, Allah, He's testing us as well. Okay, what are you going to do? How are you going to help your Muslims? So yes, they are suffering, but guess what? Our suffering is waiting for us if we do not help our Muslims. Our suffering is waiting for us if we are the type of people that we're not going to be helping the Muslims. So it's actually a test for us as well. In a way, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is testing. Are you part of the Muslim Ummah? Are you part of the Muslim body that when they are going through something difficult, that you're actually going to come to their help? What is going to be your response? Are you going to feel sorry for them? Are you going to do anything about them according to your ability? So it is actually a test for us as well. All right. Any other questions? Let's see, there's some in the chat. All right. Okay. If you guys don't mind, I have a headache. I've been having headaches, migraine attacks, and all of this. So if you don't mind, we can call it a day. I'm feeling actually very tired and also so inshallah we can call it a day, and then we can continue next week.